So we find all the user role by user ID. So we pass the user ID, and then we find all the respective user roles for this user ID. So here is the create the user roles. So we need to be pass the user ID, and then after the user ID get it, find it, the user ID, we mapped it user ID, set the users and the respective user that's we are looking for, and after that we save the user roles. That's very simple functionalities. So we can combine your in the business logic into the your service server implementation part. You define the interfaces, how interfaces look like that one, and then you can implement the your services based on the different repositories. If you need more 3 or 4 repositories, you can call it, you can implement the your business logic out of that one. That's the reason I said this is a more professional way. How can you inject, how can you call, how can you dependency inject to the Spring Boot with the really professional way, really functional way. So all the repositories define here and define here, then after that you build your business logic. That's you expected. So it's just very simple, CRUD operations is there. If you need complex functions, maybe more complex, you can also do it like that way, right? Systematic way to handle. So implementation part, even we did nothing here, but we can continue that one. Just like we define the interfaces and nothing to implement here. So no interface here. So that means we define interface here. We implement those interfaces into our impl classes. That's exactly put it the same structure, service and service impl in the packet, and exactly the name will be it's the standard way, the professional way. So we have a name, the interface name, and an impl class. So that means the implementation class implements this interface. Just clearly understand, everybody can understand how it is doing. But if you are doing badly, it will not look like that way. So in the professional way, that's I said, really clean code, clear understanding, your code could be understood really be the beginners. Maybe those who have really little experience about Java programming or Spring Boot programming or Spring programming, they can clearly understand, or they can quickly understand your program code if you are write down really systematic way to program it. And that's I say this is one of really professional way to do. That's I learned last 10 years or 12 years in the professional industry. So that means we define our models, we define our repositories, and we implement our interface, our business logic. Then what we need to next, we need to be define all the controllers, the resource controller definition. So we have only 2 controllers. So you see all the very simple, very straightforward. So it is the registration control annotated controller, race controller. This request mappings is the base part of my services, and it has all the definition of you have AutoWare. We can go this way. The AutoWare and the service interface definition, we call the interface definitions. So you can see the get all user registration, get user registration by content, the user registration, create user registration with the post methods, put mapping, post mapping. We can also request mapping with the method name. We can do different way depending how we handle it. So the get mappings, we call our service interface definition service. If I go there, it's interface definition, exactly what we're looking for, the controller. So then you have the content, and you have the post methods, post mappings. We just simply delete and request body. We pass the body methods, and we pass the very straightforward user registration ID, and pass the object of your request. What is putting your objects. So user registration, simply object request objects. So you put it here and then delete. Very straightforward, the controller. So there is here the same thing. You have defined the request mapping, the base mapping API, user roles. You can define what's role you set in the company. Maybe your boss will define. You can define like that way. You can define that way. But I said this is one of the standard way. How can you call your URL, the REST URL, the HTTP URL calls. So you have a different possibility to map it or to define it. But you can need to be discussed with your company or your boss. How can you define it? So I found it like that's way is one of the way to defining your APIs or your REST APIs, REST endpoints. So you see the user roles and a little bit complex one. So it has the user roles. If you try to update or create one on user role, you need to use a registration ID, and then you pass to the user role ID to update a specific one. When we create, the user pass the user role ID, and you pass the user role objects and save the user role. And very simple, very straightforward, and very professional way to handle. So we did it our controller definitions, we did our model definition, we did build the repository, and then we define the service interface, we implement the services, and then we define the controllers, and the controller defined all the endpoint request and response pattern by URL pattern here. And after that, when our model done, repository done, service implementation done, or other utility functionalities done, and there is some exception classes. If I need it, you can build your own exception classes. Then I'll use these exception classes into the controller, or it doesn't matter where in the controller class or implementation class. You can even whatever you like to do. So some cases I use it, some cases not. So you see that I use my own exception class handling messes and so on and so forth. This is all the things, the utility part. So when the model done, repository done, service implementation done, all utility functionalities, controller done, we need to be deployed. We can build applications. So that's the part. And then build the application, I already discussed about this one. So if you think about this one, we defined all the application.yml file. When you create the Spring Boot application, Spring initializer will default create the Spring application.properties file. You can also use these application.properties files, or you can use also the YAML files. Doesn't matter. These both are working properly. That's right. So we defined all the sorry. We define the port, and we have the content path. We define the which environmental variable we are, and we've defined the application. We define the password. We define this is all the information will be overwritten from the externally. That's I define here. Override all the information externally. This is a professional way to handle. So you just simply define it here, and then all the hard-coded value, but you override it from externally. So we define the username, database names, and then so on and so forth, because now we can say this is the Hibernate will create the schema. That's the reason we put it create or update, doesn't matter which one we are. So just create it, this one with the Hibernate will create the schema, and you will manually create the sequences. When the next screencast I will discuss about to create how can you the database schema creation is done by the Flyway, and all the schema creation done by the Flyway. That's I will discuss later part of the screencast or later part of the videos. So we define it here, then we need to be build the application. So even though there is a standard JUnit testing, that's I said into my presentations, because if you already know this is the testing part really important. So you code it, you can do the unit testing. After the unit testing done, you can do the testing with the unit test also. Then we will do here, this case we'll do the Postman testing. That's we already have it here. So Postman testing we'll do it together now now. So then that means we need to create one special version. So we have already the version number, how can say the version, I don't know how version is a 2.1.2.3. So let's change the version number if I expect it. So let's see really bad way to handle. So version number 2.3.3. So it's we created the version number. So those here are new, just like it's a pom.xml file. So all the dependency what you put it into the dependency files, because the application is running, we can stop it and stop it applications. That's the reason it's throwing the exception. It doesn't matter. So it has all the dependency. It has a PostgreSQL API dependency, and the Lombok, and then JPA and REST, and the actuator and DevOps tools, and so on and so forth. So we can simply create the versions, new version of the applications. As you see, you simply go there, or you can also create maybe the